My name is Ethan Walker, and the worst day of my life began with a wedding announcement. I was standing in a grocery store holding a basket full of instant noodles and coffee when my phone buzzed. The message came from my friend Sarah. "Have you seen Emily's post?" My stomach tightened. "No." "What?" Three dots appeared. Then a screenshot arrived. I stared at it. Emily Parker, my girlfriend of 4 years, smiling beside a man I had never seen before. The caption read, "I said yes to the love of my life." For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I called her immediately. She answered on the third ring. "Ethan, tell me this isn't real." Silence. "Emily." She sighed. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "Soon." I laughed. A terrible, broken laugh. "You're engaged?" "It isn't what you think." "Then explain." Another silence. "Finally," she said, "his family can offer me a future." The words hit harder than the engagement. A future? "Ethan, we've been struggling for years. We were building something. I got tired of waiting." I closed my eyes. "How long?" "A few months." "A few months?" "I'm sorry." I hung up. Not because I forgave her. Because I couldn't listen anymore. 3 days later, I packed everything I owned into 2 suitcases and bought a train ticket out of the city. I had no destination. I just needed distance. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. The train stopped in Brighton City. I rented a cheap hotel room. The next morning, I walked aimlessly through downtown until I found myself standing outside the city courthouse. A banner hung above the entrance. Express Marriage Registration Week. I laughed despite myself. Of all places. "Excuse me." I turned. An elderly woman smiled at me. "Are you here for registration?" "No." "You should go inside. They have free coffee." I hadn't eaten breakfast. 5 minutes later, I was holding terrible coffee in a crowded government office. That was when I met Alexander Hayes. I noticed him because everyone else was pretending not to. He sat alone near the window. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect face. He looked like the kind of man who had never worried about rent. Unfortunately, he also looked familiar. Then I recognized him. Alexander Hayes, CEO of Hayes Group, youngest billionaire in the country. He was staring at paperwork, and he looked miserable. Before I could stop myself, I walked over. "Bad day." He looked up. "Excuse me. You look like someone sentenced you to prison." To my surprise, he laughed. "Something like that." I sat down. "Wedding." He raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" I pointed at the forms. He actually smiled. "You?" "My girlfriend left me for someone richer." His expression changed. "That's unfortunate." "Thanks." We sat in silence. Then he asked, "For years?" I blinked. "How did you know?" "You have the expression." "What expression?" "The one people have after someone destroys their ability to trust." I stared at him. "That's oddly specific." He looked away. "My grandfather is dying." The statement surprised me. "I'm sorry. He wants me married." "And you don't." "I don't know." That answer felt honest. More honest than most people ever sounded. A clerk suddenly called out, "Mr. Hayes." Alexander stood. Then another clerk shouted, "Mr. Walker." I stood too. Alexander looked at me. "Good luck." "You too." 10 minutes later, I signed 3 documents. The clerk smiled. "Congratulations." "On what?" She laughed. "Your marriage." I frowned. "What marriage?" Before she could answer, another employee rushed into the office. "There's been a filing problem." The room became chaotic. People shouted. Folders changed hands. Someone yelled about document numbers. Then I heard a familiar voice. "What do you mean we're married?" I turned. Alexander stood across the room. For the first time since meeting him, he looked genuinely shocked. "What?" He walked toward me holding a certificate. "No." I laughed nervously. "No." He handed me the paper. I read it once, then twice, then a third time. Marriage certificate. Alexander Hayes. Ethan Walker. My hand started shaking. This isn't possible. Apparently it is. We signed the wrong forms. He nodded. Yes. I stared at him. He stared at me. The clerk looked ready to faint. "I'm so sorry." I looked back at the certificate. Legally married. To a billionaire. Because of paperwork. This can be fixed. Alexander rubbed his forehead. Eventually, the registrar responsible for corrections is overseas for 2 weeks. I blinked. 2 weeks? Yes. I waited for him to become angry. He didn't. Instead, he looked thoughtful. Then he asked, "Do you have somewhere to stay?" "A hotel." He nodded. "Come with me." "What? Temporarily?" "Absolutely not. My family cannot discover this situation." "Your family?" He exhaled. "My grandfather's final wish was to see me married." I stared at him. "You want me to pretend to be your spouse?" "Only temporarily." "This is insane." "Agreed." I should have said no. I wanted to say no. Instead, I asked, "How temporary?" He smiled. "That's negotiable." 3 hours later, I stood outside Hayes Manor. The house was larger than some hotels. I looked at Alexander. "I've made a terrible decision." "Probably." The front doors opened. At least 20 people waited inside. An elderly man in a wheelchair smiled broadly. "Alexander." Then he looked at me. His eyes filled with tears. "You brought your husband home." The entire family erupted in applause. I stared at Alexander. Alexander stared at the ceiling. And I realized my life had somehow become even more complicated. Before I could speak, a woman rushed forward and hugged me. "Welcome to the family." Another person took my suitcase. Someone else asked about my favorite food. A younger man grinned. "We've been waiting years for Alexander to settle down." I looked at my accidental husband. He looked almost apologetic. Almost. At that exact moment, I understood one terrifying truth. Escaping my old life had been the easy part. My new problems were only just getting started. I did not sleep my first night at Hayes Manor. That was partly because my room was larger than my entire apartment, and partly because I was accidentally married to a billionaire. At 7 in the morning, someone knocked on my door. "Mr. Hayes?" I sat upright. "Which one?" A woman laughed softly. "The new one." I opened the door. A housekeeper smiled. "Lady Margaret requests breakfast." "Requests?" "Yes." "Can I refuse?" She smiled wider. "You can try." 5 minutes later, I entered a dining room that looked like a museum. Alexander sat at one end of the table. Perfect suit, perfect posture, perfect indifference. He glanced at me. "Good morning." "Is it?" "No." "Good." To my surprise, he almost smiled. Then an elderly woman stood and hugged me. "You must be Ethan." "Yes." "I'm Margaret Hayes, Alexander's grandmother." The woman squeezed my hands. "Oh, you're lovely." I blinked. "Thank you." She sat me beside her. "I always wanted another grandson." Alexander sighed. "Grandmother." "What?" "Please don't adopt my husband before breakfast." I nearly choked. Margaret laughed. "He blushes." "I adore him." The rest of the family slowly arrived. Everyone welcomed me. Everyone except Alexander. He remained polite, respectful, and completely impossible to understand. After breakfast, a young woman grabbed my arm. "Escape with me." I stared. "What?" She grinned. "I'm Charlotte, Alexander's younger sister. I've waited years to embarrass my brother." She pulled me toward the door. "Come on." 30 minutes later, we sat in a private garden. Charlotte studied me carefully. So, how did you convince Alexander to marry you?" "It was an administrative error." She laughed. "No, seriously. I'm serious." She stopped laughing. "Oh, exactly." For the next hour, I explained everything. The courthouse, the paperwork, the mistake. When I finished, Charlotte stared at me. "This is the greatest thing that's ever happened." "To whom?" "Me." She smiled. "You have no idea how boring rich people are." I laughed despite myself. That afternoon, the media discovered our marriage. The first alert appeared on Charlotte's phone. She gasped. "Oh no." "What?" She showed me the screen. "Billionaire CEO secretly marries mystery man." I closed my eyes. "That's bad." "It gets worse." Another notification appeared. "Who is Ethan Walker?" Then another. "Unknown husband shocks business world." My stomach dropped. "I need to leave." Charlotte shook her head. Too late. She was right. By evening, every news channel discussed our marriage. Pundits debated my identity. Experts questioned my motives. Strangers analyzed my photographs. I had become famous by accident. Later that evening, Margaret found me hiding in the library. Running away already? Considering it. She sat beside me. "Alexander likes you." I laughed. "Are we discussing the same Alexander?" "He brought you here because we're legally married." She smiled. My grandson never does anything he doesn't want to do. I didn't know how to answer that, because the frightening part was that I was beginning to suspect she might be right. Before leaving, Margaret touched my hand. Whatever happens, she said, don't let other people decide your value. I watched her walk away. For reasons I couldn't explain, those words stayed with me. That frightened me more than the marriage certificate ever had. And I still barely knew my husband. That night, I found Alexander in the library. He stood by the window. Did you see the news? Yes. Aren't you worried? No. Why? He looked at me. Because panic never solves anything. I wished I possessed that skill. People think I'm a gold digger. They'll survive. What about your shareholders? They'll survive too. I stared at him. Do you ever worry? A long silence followed. Finally, he answered. Constantly. The honesty surprised me. Before I could respond, my phone rang. I checked the screen. Sophia. My ex-girlfriend. I almost declined. Alexander noticed. You should answer. I did. Ethan. Her voice sounded breathless. How did you get this number? We need to talk. No. Ethan, please. No. I made a mistake. I laughed. That's interesting. Please. Why now? Silence. Then she asked the question. Are you really married to Alexander Hayes? There it was. The real reason. I ended the call. Alexander watched quietly. Your ex? Yes. She wants something. Yes. He nodded. I thought so. The next morning, things became worse. 3 luxury cars arrived at Hayes Manor. Charlotte looked horrified. Oh no. What? The Whitmores. Ooh, people who think money equals nobility. That sounded promising. Inside the drawing room, 3 elegantly dressed guests waited. An older man stood. Alexander. Richard. The man looked at me. And this is my husband. The room became silent. Richard smiled, but not kindly. I see. His wife examined me. What family are you from? I'm from Dayton. She blinked. No, your family. The Walkers. More silence. Richard laughed softly. Interesting. I suddenly understood. They didn't think I belonged here. The conversation became uncomfortable. Every question felt like an examination. Which schools? Which clubs? Which connections? I failed every test. Eventually, Richard turned to Alexander. Surely this arrangement is temporary. Before Alexander could answer, I stood. Excuse me. I left the room. I didn't stop walking until I reached the garden. For the first time since arriving, I felt truly alone. A few minutes later, someone sat beside me. Alexander. Sorry. The word surprised me. For what? My world. I laughed bitterly. Your world hates me. No. He looked toward the house. My world fears anyone it doesn't understand. I considered that. Is that why you're always distant? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, distance is safer. The statement felt heavier than everything else he'd said. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, I didn't see a billionaire. I saw a lonely man, a man carrying responsibilities so large that isolation had become survival. And for the first time since our accidental marriage, I began wondering if Alexander Hayes might be even more trapped than I was. 3 months after accidentally marrying Alexander Hayes, I stopped referring to our marriage as temporary. Not out loud, anyway. The strange part was that nothing dramatic had changed. Alexander was still reserved, still frustrating, still impossible to understand. But somewhere between charity galas, family dinners, and late-night conversations in the library, my life had quietly become intertwined with his. One evening, I found him working in his office. You're still awake? He looked up. So are you. I couldn't sleep. He closed his laptop. Bad dream. I smiled. How did you know? You always make tea after bad dreams. The answer startled me. You noticed that? I notice a lot of things. For some reason, that made my chest hurt. A week later, I learned exactly how much he noticed. Charlotte burst into my room without knocking. We have a problem. What kind? The Victoria Sinclair kind. I blinked. Who? Charlotte looked horrified. You don't know Victoria Sinclair? Should I? She's beautiful, wealthy, terrifying, and she's been trying to marry Alexander for years. Oh, that's all you have to say? What else should I say? She grabbed my arm. She's here. Unfortunately, Charlotte was right. Victoria Sinclair was beautiful. She was also staring at me like I was an administrative error. Mr. Walker. Mrs. Hayes, actually. Her smile tightened. Cute. Alexander entered moments later. Victoria. Alexander. She kissed his cheek. I try not to care. I failed. We should have dinner, she said. We're having dinner now, he replied. She laughed. Alone? No. The answer came immediately. She looked surprised. So protective. He glanced at me. Yes. That single word stayed with me all evening. A few days later, the media found a new scandal. This time, the source was Sophia. I discovered it when reporters appeared outside Hayes Manor. One shouted, Mr. Walker, did you target Mr. Hayes for money? Another yelled, Is your marriage fraudulent? My blood ran cold. Inside, Charlotte looked furious. I'm going to destroy her. Please don't. Why not? Because murder is illegal. She considered that. Unfortunately, Alexander entered carrying a tablet. She gave an interview. I took it. The headline made me sick. My ex used a billionaire to escape poverty. I looked up. I know. The certainty in his voice surprised me. Ow! He sat beside me. Because I know you. The room became quiet. For months, I had questioned whether Alexander truly understood me. Apparently, he had been paying attention all along. The scandal grew anyway. Television hosts debated my motives. Social media called me manipulative. Commentators questioned my character. I stopped reading everything. Then Margaret announced a family gathering. Perfect timing, Charlotte muttered. She wasn't wrong. The entire Hayes family attended. So did several business partners. I felt sick before arriving. At dinner, one executive smiled at me. Mr. Walker. Ethan. Of course. He sipped his wine. Your adjustment to this lifestyle has been remarkably quick. The insult was subtle. Not subtle enough. Before I could answer, another guest laughed. We're all curious. About what? I asked. Whether this marriage was ever intended to last. The room became silent. I looked at Alexander. He looked angry. Good. At least one of us knew what to say. The first guest continued. Surely everyone understands this arrangement began as a convenience. I stood. Excuse me. Sit down, Alexander said. The room froze. Not because of his tone, because nobody had ever heard him sound like that. He looked at the guests. You want to know if this marriage is temporary? Nobody answered. I'll answer. He stood, slowly, deliberately. Then he looked directly at me. Ethan is not temporary. My heart stopped. He is not an arrangement. Silence. He is not an obligation. Nobody moved. Then Alexander said the words that changed everything. He is my family. I couldn't breathe. Around us, nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Because for the first time, Alexander Hayes wasn't protecting an agreement. He was protecting me. Later that night, I found him alone on the terrace. Why? He looked confused. Why what? What you said. He stared at the city. Because it was true. I stepped closer. Alexander. He finally looked at me. For the first time since we met, he looked afraid. I never wanted this marriage. I know, but then you stayed. I couldn't speak. You laughed with my grandmother. He smiled slightly. You argued with Charlotte. I laughed through sudden tears. You made this house feel like a home. The world seemed to stop. I don't know when it happened, he admitted. Neither do I. We stood there for a long time. Then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. I opened it. Attached was a photograph of a document, our marriage certificate, and beneath it, one sentence. You should ask Alexander why your signatures don't match the courthouse records. My hand started shaking. What is it? Alexander asked. I handed him the phone. He looked at the image. Then all the color disappeared from his face. Alexander, he didn't answer. Tell me what's wrong. He took a slow breath. We need to go inside. That frightened me more than the message. We returned to the library. He locked the door. You're scaring me. I'm sorry. Sorry for what? He closed his eyes. For not telling you sooner. My stomach dropped. Telling me what? When he opened his eyes again, I saw something I had never seen before. Guilt. The paperwork mistake wasn't entirely an accident, he said quietly. The room spun. What? I thought the documents had been corrected. Alexander. His voice broke. I think someone wanted us married from the beginning. I stared at him. Who? He shook his head. I don't know yet. You're telling me our marriage wasn't an accident? I'm telling you that someone changed our lives before we met. For the first time since entering Hayes Manor, I was terrified of the truth. More than ever, I did not sleep after Alexander told me the truth. Someone had manipulated the paperwork. Someone had ensured that, out of thousands of people in the city, Alexander Hayes and Ethan Walker would leave the courthouse legally married. By morning, the story had exploded. Every news channel carried the same headline: Billionaire Marriage Scandal Exposed. I sat in the library staring at my phone. Alexander entered. You should eat. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday. I said I'm not hungry. He sat across from me. I'm sorry. I laughed bitterly. You keep saying that. Because I should have told you. When? The moment I suspected something. And when was that? He hesitated. 3 weeks ago. The answer hurt. Not because he lied. Because I understood why. He was afraid. So was I. Before either of us could speak again, Charlotte burst into the room. We have a disaster. That seems to be a pattern lately, I said. She ignored me. The board wants an emergency meeting. Alexander stood. Of course they do. And grandfather wants to see both of you. For the first time since I met Charlotte, she looked frightened. An hour later, we entered the main drawing room. The entire family was there. Margaret, Alexander's grandfather, 3 board representatives, several relatives who had barely acknowledged my existence before. One of the board members spoke first. The situation is serious. Alexander remained calm. I'm aware. The markets are reacting. I'm aware. The marriage may be legally challenged. That got my attention. What? The man looked at me. If the documentation was manipulated, questions arise. Questions. A polite word for disaster. Another relative leaned forward. The simplest solution is annulment. The room became silent. I looked at Alexander. He looked furious. No. The answer came immediately. The relative frowned. You haven't considered the consequences. I have. Your position could be threatened. Alexander didn't blink. I said no. For the first time, I understood the pressure he carried every day. Everyone wanted something from him. Even now, especially now. That evening, I packed my suitcase. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I simply accepted reality. When Alexander found me, I was folding my last shirt. What are you doing? Leaving? No. Yes. He stepped closer. You can't. I can. Why? The question broke my heart. Because I love you. He froze. The word surprised both of us. I took a breath. I love you enough to leave. He stared at me. Ethan, your family needs you. I need you. No. My voice shook. You need Hayes Group. He reached for my hand. I never wanted to choose. But you will have to. Silence. Then I picked up my suitcase. He didn't stop me. That hurt more than anything. The next morning, I arrived at the train station. Reporters waited everywhere. Apparently, even heartbreak generated headlines. My phone vibrated. Charlotte, turn on a television. What? Now? I entered a nearby cafe. Every screen displayed the same image. Alexander, standing behind a podium. Live. The caption read, Special statement from Alexander Hayes. The room fell silent. He looked exhausted, but determined. Good afternoon. Flashes exploded. For the past 24 hours, there has been considerable speculation regarding my marriage. He paused. I will answer those questions now. A reporter shouted. Was your marriage fraudulent? No. Was it accidental? Alexander smiled. Yes. The room erupted. He raised a hand. Our marriage began because of an administrative manipulation. Another reporter stood. Will you seek an annulment? Alexander looked directly into the cameras. No. The word echoed. Why not? He took a breath. Because while our marriage may have begun accidentally, my feelings did not. I stopped breathing. Every person in the cafe stared at the television. Alexander continued. I spent most of my life believing responsibility mattered more than happiness. His voice softened. Then I met Ethan Walker. Tears blurred my vision. He taught my family how to laugh again. Another pause. He taught me that loyalty cannot be purchased. The cameras flashed endlessly. And he taught me that home is not a place. He smiled. It is a person. I sat down because my legs stopped working. A reporter asked, "Are you choosing him over Hayes Group?" Alexander shook his head. "I reject the question." "Why?" "Because Ethan is not separate from my future." He straightened. "He is my future." The entire cafe erupted. People gasped. Someone started crying. I might have been that person. Alexander looked directly into the camera one final time. "Today, I formally introduce Ethan Walker as a permanent member of the Hayes family." He smiled. "My husband." The broadcast ended. I stared at the blank screen. Then I heard a familiar voice. "You missed your train." I turned. Alexander stood behind me. "Ow! Private helicopter." I laughed through tears. "Of course." He sat beside me. I meant every word. "I know. Are you still leaving?" I looked at him. The man who chose me over fear, over power, over expectation. "No." He smiled. "Good." Outside, reporters continued shouting. Investors continued arguing. The world continued spinning. But for the first time in my life, I understood something important. Family is not built through blood. It is not purchased through wealth. And it is not granted through status. Family is built by the people who choose to stay. And somehow, through the greatest accident of my life, Alexander Hayes chose me. Later, I would learn that Sophia watched the broadcast live. So did Victoria Sinclair. Both of them saw the same thing I did. Not a business arrangement. Not a strategic alliance. Not a mistake. They saw a man willing to risk everything for someone he loved. And for the first time since my old life ended, I stopped asking whether I deserved happiness. Instead, I accepted the truth. Sometimes the life you never planned becomes the life you were always meant to find. And sometimes love arrives disguised as the world's worst mistake.